Very good evening to everybody. It's Monday. Apparently, it's a public holiday, as if we need it. Freedom Day, which is rather ironic because we obviously come to you from lockdown. And as you guessed, this is Conversations from Lockdown. And if I'm not mistaken, this is, I have to refer to notes, episode 15. We've already done 15 of this. So we are rocking. We're glad you are enjoying. Don't forget, we have our competitions. We have our skipping challenge, and we also have the hobby horse derby challenge. Make sure you get your videos to admin@kylearmyparkclub.co.za, and the closing date for those is the 1st at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we will upload them to our YouTube channel. Give them a couple days. We'll let you know exactly the day that we're going to announce the winner, but we upload them at the same time to make it fair. The most likes on our YouTube channel will walk away with the respective prizes. Remember, there is 5,000 Rand up for grabs for the Hobby Horse Derby competition and 2,000 Rand for the Kent Farrington Skipping Challenge. Right, my guest this evening is a legend of show jumping in South Africa. And as I look at the screen, he's currently maneuvering himself. Get comfortable, Tony Lewis. You're going to need it. You're going to need that cushion. It's going to be a long chat because you've had a remarkable long career.
Absolutely.
How are you, first of all?
First of all, I'm super. I'm safe and locked down. As you know, I'm at Eaton Farm, and Angie Meredith has closed the gate, boy. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out. So I'm riding myself to death, which is great.
Perfect. There are worse places where one could be locked down. You've got space, you've got fresh air.
Lovely. It's a beautiful place, lovely facilities here, and yeah, I'm on holiday. It's lovely.
Now, when you say, Tony, you're riding, is Angie putting you to work there, riding all the clients' horses? Are you riding more than you normally would, or just yours?
No, I'm riding one of hers and two of mine. So, and the other clients say I'm not good enough to ride their horses. So there you are. What can I say?
once they've watched this, which I'm sure they will, they'll think twice, because you have had a remarkable career, Springbok colors, overseas tours, a list of achievements as long as my arm, if not longer. Let's talk about it, Tony. Let's start right from the beginning. Get yourself comfortable for a candid and conversational chat here with the legendary Tony Lewis. Were you born and bred Joburg boy?
Joburg boy, Aiden. Do you want me to give you the date?
Yes, I would. How old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 77. 1943 I was born. Yeah.
Yeah, fit and strong.
I'm very fit and strong, yes. No, I think that it's all in the mind, isn't it? It's only a number, hey?
Yep.
That's what I think, yeah.
So you were born and bred Joburg, went to school Joburg, never lived anywhere else?
No, not. I've lived overseas a little bit, but that was later on in my university career. But otherwise, I was born here. Went to school. I went to school in CBC in Pretoria to start off with, and then Parktown Boys. I matriculated at Parktown Boys in 1958, and then went to work for Anglo American, which I did for 7-8 years. During that time, I did a university degree part-time at night. And when I'd finished, Harry Oppenheimer gave me a scholarship to go to America, and I did an MBA in the States for 2 years. So I stayed in the States, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It was a wonderful 2 years. And then I came back to join Anglo. And I've been on the stock exchange. I left Anglo, went on the stock exchange. And I've been property developing for the last quite a few years now. So I was and still am classified as an amateur in the sport, although the sport has been my passion all my life. And if I go back to my early days, I was taught to ride by Leslie Taylor, Barry Taylor's father.
I want to ask you before we go there. you're obviously a very, very bright man, and probably why you decided not to go and make horses a profession and get a real job, the better choice, the bright choice. But let's go. Did you come from a horsey background? Were your parents horsey? Are you first generation? Was there anything anything in your lineage that was horsey?
Not really, Aiden. My mother was a horsey passionate person. You know, she was brought up in the old Johannesburg in Doornfontein when they had carriages and that sort of stuff, and went on a Sunday picnic to the Orange Grove Hotel, that sort of thing. And she was involved with horses, but just on an amateur sort of non-competitive basis. And somehow that tickled a fancy in me. And I can remember as a little guy, my parents used to drop me at the old ranch show when the showgrounds were where Wits is now taken, which has now been taken over by Wits, but at Milner Park. And I would go and sit in the stands on my own and just watch the horses and watch them all day. And then they'd pick me up and we'd go home. So, yeah, there was something about horses that really, I guess, is in my blood. Unfortunately, I think that if you're going to make, or certainly at that stage where a career decision had to be made, I decided that either I had to stay in Europe and proceed with my career in jumping or show jumping, or because that's really where my love was, or I had to come home. I had a widowed mother at that stage, which I had to look after. So I had to come back to South Africa after I'd studied, and proceeded with my commitment to Anglo-American and to the Oppenheimers.
Well, I want to go back even further. I want to pick up the story from when you were at the ranch show. But first, I'm going to ask you just to sit back a little bit, because we kind of just seeing the top of your head, Tony. I think your camera's moved. Let's just tilt that camera. Yeah, that's better. Okay, now.
Okay, sorry.
No problem, because this is going to be a long chat, so let's get comfy.
And now I'm gone.
No, you're frozen.
Jeez. Okay.
There you are. There you are. You're back. You're back. Okay, right. Okay. So let's pick up the story. You're a little tyke. You're at the ranch show. You're watching horses. You come home. You say, "Mom, Dad, I want a pony, or I want a riding lesson." Who started teaching you?
Mom gave me a riding lesson for my 10th birthday with Leslie Taylor. And unfortunately, that started for her. It started a chain of events that she got involved with, to her financial detriment. But then Leslie Taylor came to the rescue. He obviously thought I was worthwhile spending some money on, or investing some money in, and I sort of worked for him part-time while I was still at school, and rode my bike out to his stables, which were, out in what is now, what's that area? Sort of Marlborough, that Marlborough area, okay, near Santon there, and used to ride out every Wednesday afternoon and spent the weekends there teaching for him and teaching all the, helping him with the young kids and that sort of thing. So that sort of really got me going. And then,
how old were you at that stage? Because you started with him when you were 10, so you rode with him for quite a few years. At what stage did you start working for him?
Funny enough, I started high school when I was 10. I skipped a couple of years in primary school, which was a silly thing for my parents to do for me.
Is that just because is that because you're very academic, or?
Well, I obviously was bright enough to do that, but I think that the issue with that is that physically you are just 2 years behind what is happening, and that's how I went through high school. So I matriculated when I was 15, and in my 15th year, and I'd been riding all the time, and progressing with Leslie, who was a wonderful instructor and a wonderful man. For me, he was an old school type instructor, but his biggest advantage was he imparted the most amazing amount of confidence in everybody that he taught, and everybody that left there were tough. You know, there was no nonsense. He was a tough schoolmaster and a tough instructor, but very good, a very feeling and wonderful guy. And I mean, I knew Barry when he was a little guy, and when his thumb was half bitten off by a horse. I remember the day when he was 3. So I know the Taylor family quite well, and they were wonderful. Leslie was wonderful to me. I can't speak highly enough of him. And he was then appointed the coach for a team that was sent to Europe when I was 15 in my matric year. The SANF at that stage, or the equivalent of SANF, it was SANF, got an invite from the FEI to, I'm just trying to think who I can't quite remember who our president was at that time. I think it was, that doesn't matter. Anyway, we got this invite to send a team across. And so Tony Wilson, who was a director of De Beers at that time, and who I knew, put some money together and he largely sponsored my trip to Europe, because the other members of the team were, of course, Gonda, who I'm sure mentioned it in her interview. A fellow called Rory Donnellan that you wouldn't know. Rory Donnellan was a Natal guy, same matric year as me, and very bright guy. He actually managed to crack a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford, and then, or Cambridge, is it? Yeah. And George Myberg, Yvonne Peterson, that was then, and ended up as Yvonne Johnson, or Yvonne De Lange, as she is known today, and myself. So the 5 of us were chosen, and we took our horses by boat to England. So that meant a train trip, because there were no horse boxes in those days. In fact, if you went to any shows outside of the province, you either rode them or you went by train. And the train trip, I mean, I can remember riding to the Pretoria show from leading horses, and we used to ride into the ranch show, the old ranch show in Milner Park, the one that I told that was the start of all my dreams. I can remember riding down Oxford Road, riding one and leading 2 horses, taking 40 horses into the ranch show, which represented Leslie's stables, with the grooms and with other young people like myself. And it was about an 8-hour ride from our stables. And that's how it was. I mean, that's how it was in those days, which was a lot of fun, I must admit. And I mean, can you imagine riding to a Pretoria show from today? And that was from where Eskom is in now. Eskom in
Sunninghill.
Sunninghill, yeah, from there to Pretoria. And
you obviously didn't leave that morning. You rode a couple of days before, or what?
You rode a couple of days before, and the horses are resilient, huh? You know, we tend to mollycoddle them a bit now, but they're resilient. I mean, I can remember going to the equivalent of an event, you know, an eventing event as a kid. From there, riding to Honeydew and back on the same day, riding there, taking part in the event, and coming home and getting home at 9 o'clock at night, you know. So things were a bit different. It was either that or you didn't do what you wanted to do. So you just did it, and you were sore the next day. But you know, you always remember the things that make you a little bit sore. You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we got on the train. We got on the train. I didn't get on the train, but the grooms got on the train, and off the horses went to Cape Town. And 2 days, 3 nights on the train, and in a cattle truck. Rig the cattle truck out so that it would take horses. And I rode a horse for a lady called Ruth Heinrich. Ruth Heinrich, who was the mother-in-law of Connor Doak and her daughter Jilly Heinrich, who was my age. She's now got passed on, unfortunately. But anyway, they lent me a horse called Durocco, and which Leslie was jumping actually in the adult classes at that stage. Remember that juniors went to adults when we were 16. Then there was no 18 or 19 or 21-year-olds. It was 16 was the age. I was 15. Gonda was 14. She's a little bit younger than me, a few months younger than me. And George Meyerberg was 14. And Denellen was, I think, he was 16. Okay. And off we went, took the horses. Durocco was a thoroughbred. Gonda's horses, she had Gungadin and Urskit, which were amazing horses. And George was going to ride Urskit, and Denellen had a thoroughbred mare called Naplam. And off we went. Denellen took his Zulu groom with him. I remember his name well, Kindi Mazibuku, and who couldn't speak a word of English. And off we went on the Carnarvon Park Castle to Southampton, 2 weeks on the boat. Horses in crates, wooden crates that they could turn around in, which were fastened to the cruise deck. And we used to go in every day, feed them, and of course, strap them to keep their muscle tone. And they did amazingly well. I mean, they got off the boat on the other side like bulls. And within 10 days, we were jumping in shows.
When you say strap them, what do you mean by strap them to keep their muscle tone? What's that?
Leslie had a method of taking what can I say? A cloth, just a big cloth, making a big pad, and hitting them with the pad, with your hand, hitting them all on their muscles, which all it did was it invigorated the blood supply to the muscles. And you do it for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll tell you, you're perspiring. Seriously.
A bit like a Chinese massage.
That's it. But actually hitting them quite hard so that it makes a loud smacking noise, huh? And the horses, the first time they think you're hitting them, and after 1 or 2 sessions or 1 session, they've got so used to it, they love it. And the horses we got off the boat, and I promise you, within days, they were, bucking and performing and carrying on. Anyway, we spent I don't want to waste too much time on this, if you don't mind.
No, you carry on. I hope you're comfortable.
Okay, I'm comfortable. Anyway, so with old Kindi, who's speaking to all the sailors in Zulu and not understanding a word that he said, and we taught him to eat with a knife and fork, because he came straight from a lovely guy, really lovely guy, and off we went. The funds that we had hired us a horse box. We had a lovely horse box, and the butters were there already. Gonda's horses had already gone. She went a bit early, and Gonda at that stage had a license to ride as an adult, even though she was 14 years old. And I must say, I can only say that my admiration for her and her talent is unbelievable. I mean, she is, and her big match temperament, unequaled. Anyway, so we went off, and we spent about nearly 2 months in England, just jumping in shows and getting a bit of experience, and jumping in the adult classes, because the English were happy to let the team jump as adults, even though we were under 16s. And also, the interesting thing is that uh, I'm sure Gondo won't mind me saying this, is that there was a minimum weight that everybody had to carry at that stage. And Gondo was able to make the weight, and it was a serious weight, because she was a big girl. And she was able to make the weight without a saddle, just in her boots, which I was a bit amazed about. But she was a tough lady, let me tell you. And we then went across to the channel. The horses went in the horse box across the channel to Hanover in Germany, where the European Junior Championships were being held. And we got special dispensation from the FEI to compete, because we'd had this invitation from the FEI and the German Federation to take part. And there we arrived with our thoroughbred horses, and there were these monster horses, and we ended up coming second. We were second to the British team, 4 faults behind the British team, tying with the German team on 4 faults, which was quite an achievement at the time when I think about it. And I think a surprise to everybody. Anyway.
And what sort of heights were those competitions?
Those heights would have been around the 130, I would say 130 maximum, at that stage. For that particular championship, I would think 130, B grade. It was.
And who was coaching you guys? Like, who was your mentor? Did Leslie go with you?
Leslie came with us, and was very hard on our fitness. Denellen was an athlete. He played on the wing for Durban High School rugby, and he also was quite a formidable hurdler. So he set the bar. And George and I were sort of not in his league, and were teased terribly by him, but we enjoyed being with him, and we both being quite competitive people. We enjoyed taking him on all the sort of runs and stuff that we did, and Leslie was very pro keeping very fit. So we rode and we ran, and that's really we didn't do a lot of sightseeing, I can promise you, but it was wonderful. It was an amazing 3 months of my life. Came back and wrote my matric, and not been there for the 3rd term, and managed to get a reasonable matric, and then I joined Anglo American, and continued with my studies at Wits University, and from there, at the end of my undergraduate, I suddenly realized that it maybe wasn't enough. I did a BCom accounting, and I applied to universities in America, because that's where I really felt my interest was, and was accepted at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, which I went off to and spent 2 years there, completing that MBA degree that I did there, which was wonderful again. But to get back to the horses, when I got back and finished my matric and started my university, well, unfortunately, the riding took a back seat. And so I guess for the next 4 years undergraduate and the 2 years in America, I didn't do much riding. And I didn't do any riding in America, because it was quite pressurized. The study work was quite pressurized, and I had a huge responsibility to do a reasonable job for the money that was being spent on me. So I put the riding aside. But as soon as I got back to South Africa, having made the decision that I should come back because I had my mother to look after, I started riding again in a small way because really I missed it. I can't tell you how much I'd missed it. And I missed horses because that's, unfortunately, my mother left me with that gene, and it's going to be there till the day I die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we progressed, and then I bought a little horse for myself, and he wasn't much good. And then a lady called Sheila Grayston, Bob Grayston's wife. She was divorced from Bob at that stage, and she offered me some rides, and she bought a horse called Take a Chance for me.
Well, just before you continue, because a lot of the viewers won't remember Bob Grayston. Who was Bob Grayston? A little bit about him.
Well, Bob Grayston probably was he's the doyen of South African show jumping. A tough man, a seriously tough man, but with amazing talent. Amazing talent with horses, a producer of horses. He produced, he had a very strong connection with Terence Millard, the trainer, and Terence Millard supplied him with the thoroughbreds that he had, the majority of them. Eventually he divorced Sheila and married Wendy Grayston, who was Wendy Stern, became Wendy Grayston. And she, in the divorce settlement, he took the two horses that he produced, both from Terence Millard. One was a horse called King Canute, which Terence had an amazing eye for horses. Bought off the back of a truck, just like Gonda's mother, I think, bought Gunga Din from the back of a plow in Cape Town. They both, I think, had Hackney blood in them, which gave them that high front end movement, a knee movement in front, which made them super careful. They were unbelievable and very courageous, both of them. So those were two of the best horses in South Africa that was King Cole and King Canute for a long time, which Bob produced. And Bob was a huge dealer. In his time, he'd spent time in Europe when he was married to Sheila, and she had horses there which they bought off the local market here, thoroughbreds, and took them across, and he did extremely well on the continent. Can't say that I remember big classes that he won or anything like that, but he was well respected. That's all I can say.
So he was a proper horseman. Was he South African bred and raised, or was he?
He was an Englishman who emigrated to South Africa. Oh, probably, I would think in the 30s, 40s, huh?
Yeah. And Tony, is it true the story that is it Bob Grayston who died on the back of a horse at Royal Show? He had a heart attack as he went through the finish or something?
Absolutely. That's exactly what happened. I think it was at not the Royal Show itself, but the Royal Show grounds used to hold a show at about January, when it was incredibly hot. You can imagine Maritzburg in January is like a sauna bath. And I think it was just too much. He actually did a show jumping round, and he must have been a good age then. And came out and fell off the horse, had a heart attack and died. What a way to go, huh?
Yeah, that's the way you'd want to go. Anyway, sorry, we digress, but go back to your story.
Okay, so then let me see, where was I?
You just come back from, you bought a little horse, was no good.
And Sheila Grayston said that she would like to give me a couple of horses to ride, and she bought a horse off Johnny Myberg at that stage called Take a Chance, who had belonged to Gonda Butters. Gonda Butters at that time. Gonda had him, and he was a little bit sort of wooden-headed, a little bit stiff in front, and probably not Gonda's type of horse at all. Anyway, she sold him to Johnny. Johnny was, yeah, she was not that happy with the horse, or maybe she was, and she just got offered a nice price, so she sold him. I liked the horse, just because he was a horse that used his front end. He was probably a little bit stiff in front with his front end. When I say his front end, his length of rein was quite long, and he didn't enjoy being restricted. And I didn't leave. And that's how I rode. I didn't restrict them. I tried not to restrict them as much as possible. And he won the Derby with me and beat Wendy Grayston in a jump off, which was most unexpected. I can remember Bob saying, as I went in, after she'd come out with quite a serious time, and he said, "Oh, well, don't worry about this one." And I just heard that as I went in. I thought, you just wait and see, and I'll take a chance. Took off like like he'd never taken off in his life before, and I beat her by a couple of seconds, which shook him rigid. Anyway, that was a bit of a, it was a bit of a turning point in my equestrian career, because that Derby was such a surprise to a lot of people, that they, on the basis of that Derby, I think, selected me to ride for the South African senior team, which had been taking part at the Ipoh Indoor International Indoor Horse Show, which South Africa was running at the old Milner Park Showgrounds in one of the halls. Started by Chris Coldry, who was a course builder, from a course builder general equestrian, quite a genius in his own way, and very imaginative in his course designing. And he started this show at the Rancho Grounds, an indoor show, which I subsequently, because he moved on, I subsequently assisted in running the show and riding in it at the same time for 10 years.
Before you tell me that story, take a chance. How old were you when you won that Derby on him? And was he a thoroughbred?
Yeah, thoroughbred. They were all thoroughbreds at that stage. I can't really remember any non-thoroughbreds. There were a couple. Wayne Dale had one, a horse called Billy that came from the Southwest.
But that was quite a lot. That was quite a lot later.
Quite a lot later. But at that stage, they were all thoroughbreds. They were all. That was our only source of horses at that stage. Was the racetrack. And there
what was Take a Chance's pedigree? Do you remember?
I remember he was by a stallion called The Bird, who was completely unfashionable at that stage. And I don't know whether he ever produced another one. He was an incredibly gutsy horse. Could have been slightly more careful, but rather they're a little bit less careful and got all the guts. That's what you really need, because when the fences get big, that's when it comes. And he would tackle anything. Whether he would have been Olympic stand or I don't know. He quite make Olympic sort of, but he was good enough to win the Grand Prix at the Milner Park Showgrounds and the Derby quite easily. So he was for me the biggest confidence booster I've ever had in any horse. So it set me up to.
That would have been like early 70s or so.
1973. 1973 on Take a Chance. Yeah. He was that year too. He was second to Peter Lavaux in the South African Championship as well. But he's a sort of horse who would go down to 2 meters, 2 meters, quite easily. And if you made a mistake, which I did, uh, in a wall at that particular South African Championship, which was in Goodwood in Cape Town, I put him so badly at the wall, he banged his head on the wall and stopped. And I thought, oh my God! And the fence was a good 2 meters at that stage, because it was in the sort of final round. I turned him around and just sent him at it again. He just jumped it without a blink. So he was that sort of horse, which I think, if you have horses like that, hang on to them. Even if they're not that careful, if you really want to jump big fences, that's the most important thing, is they must have the heart.
Yeah. So he took you to the indoor show, the Ipoh Indoor show, Milner Park, and that you represented South Africa for the second time, because you had your junior colors.
That's right. That was my first year as an adult South African Springbok, if you want to call it that. And I stayed on that team the whole of the 70s, right through to the last Ipoh Indoor show, which took place in 1982.
So tell me about that show. Did they have visiting teams every year? So every year you got the chance to renew your colors, to be selected?
Every year. And the teams didn't change much, huh? And we were never beaten, huh? Aidan, we were never beaten. And it was not on our own horses, huh? Because it was a formula that I helped develop there on borrowed horses. It was jumped. The team events were jumped at 1.30 meters, not huge, because nobody will lend the best horses.
Yeah.
And in the end, we had to pay for the horses, and we had teams from every country I can think about, just about Canada, America, and we had good riders. Huh? We had Farges and Homfeld came. Jim Day came from Canada. Kathy Kusner was here. And from on the English side, we had Harvey, David, Annalie. That's where Annalie made her appearance from. So we had a lot of interest, because we held the show in January, which was an off time for all the people who jumped in or rode in England. So the horse show ran Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday was off. Monday, Tuesday. Interesting. And why we chose it that way was that, number one, it was easy to get the television coverage. And by the time it got to the second last day, the interest had built up so hugely that we pretty well filled the stadium, which held about 4,000 people indoors, huh? And it was full. And in fact, one of the nights, or one of the years, we were, and it was done over 5 nights, 2 individual competitions for the people to get used to the horses, and then the last 3 nights were the international team event, and it was done on a points basis. And we ended up on the 3rd night, the one year, where we were tying with Great Britain, and we had a jump off, and they held the news back on television for us, because it was so exciting. I mean, it was really something else.
Yeah.
And what was great about the show, and I've often thought about trying to do it again, because we catered for everything.
Tony, before we continue, I'm just losing you. Your camera is just pointing down your. There you are. There you are. Carry on.
My back. Okay.
There you
are. My back. Okay.
Yeah, you back.
The interesting thing about the show was it catered for every aspect of the sport. And when I say every aspect of the sport, I mean it. Dressage, children, junior events, showing events, carriage driving, breed classes, and show jumping. So everybody who was a member of what was then THS, got a show in at that show, and it was the showcase of the sport for the whole year, and built up an amazing public response for the sport. And we really need something like that again, you know. It was something everybody looked forward to. Not huge prize money, but good prize money. Thank you to the Premier Milling Group and to Ipoh, Epic World, and everything, all their other products. But they did a wonderful job and supported me as a person there in the sense that they gave me a lot of authority and free rein to do what I thought was right with the rest of the committee, and it was great, and managed to jump at the same time.
And how,
And I've
do you
always,
remember
yeah,
some of your teammates during those years when you say
yeah,
that the team didn't change much?
didn't change much. Yeah, at that stage, Gonda and Mickey Lowe were the probably number 1 and 2 in the country, and then we had Philip Smith, who subsequently emigrated and was killed in a car smash, unfortunately. Highly talented rider, amazing producer of horses. Peter Gotts, who has retired, I think, from show jumping or any equestrian sport for years now, to Plettenberg Bay. Maybe it was a good thing. Maybe it's a sad loss because he was a highly talented guy. And myself, and that was really the team. That's how it you know, Gotts went. When I joined the team, it was a year in which Gotts was in the team with the other 3, and then they replaced Gotts with me, and it didn't change for the rest because we didn't get beaten. We won every year, and it was serious competition because the horses. We were very strict rules about riding horses that were connected to you, not only your own horses, but horses that were in any way couldn't ride a horse that had come from your stable, or in fact that you'd ridden the horse in the last 5 years. That was the rule.
So nobody could ever come back and say, "Oh, well, it's because they know the horses." And
yeah, look, I think I'm not saying that having watched the horses jump with their owners doesn't give you an advantage, but it's not that massive. It's not like you know the intricacies in and out.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
I'm
that
sorry.
Tony, those were full Springbok caps. Those was a proper Springbok colors.
It was recognized by the FEI as a CSIO on borrowed horses. So it was a proper organized and a recognized international event on the FEI calendar for 10 years.
So can you remember how many times you were capped with Springbok colors in total?
Total 10.
Sure.
Yeah, 10. Yeah. Yeah, and I tried to get the same thing, because I got quite involved in the admin of the sport. I felt that it's important that you do put back, and I've always been like that. And right from my first days, we ran a show for children. We used to have a horse called the Children's Horse Show, which was a sort of privately run show twice a year in the July and the December holidays for kids, and I'm talking about under 16s, and it was run by a committee of youngsters like myself at that stage, so that we were all in our sort of 20s at that stage. So I've always tried to do something and put something back, and I got involved in SANF and THS and et cetera. Some of it to my detriment. I should took up too much of my time and thinking and all sorts of things. But anyway, we did it, and I don't regret it. Well, I don't regret it at all, I must admit.
Yeah.
I try to get the same formula going on a series that I put together with the guy from New Zealand, with Australia. And we had a series, a Tri-Nation series, which went for 3 years. But unfortunately, the Australians didn't really show a lot of interest. So it was only the New Zealanders and ourselves that put on the show, because it's quite a sweat to get horses. And we had to pay. We hired the horses in those days. This is, where are we? We're talking about 10, 15 years ago. We were paying 5,000 Rand a horse to borrow them just for the show. And this was jumping them at 130. And one of the star horses, and I earmarked him at the time, was Jade Hook's horse, who then was owned by Tossie Raynor. And she was for sale. And I said to Lorette, who was on the team at that time, I said, for God's sake, Lorette, buy this horse. This is special. And she didn't take any notice of what I was saying, and I think to her detriment, because I think that's a very special horse. Anyway, that's just an aside. So that takes us back to the Ipoh Indoor show. I think that we could well afford to have something like that again, and I'm sure Barry would agree, because Barry was just sort of making his way felt at that time. He had a fantastic horse called Power Force, also a thoroughbred, and I'm sure if he's asked frankly to rate the horse today, he would say he must be in his top 3 horses that he's ever ridden in his life. Very, very talented horse. He's always said, come on, let's get another thing like that going. I said, Barry, it's not that easy. It takes a lot of, but maybe we'll do it. Maybe we'll do it again. Yeah, maybe that,
through this series, Tony, it's been brought up a number of times. Barry was very pro, said, that's got to happen again, because that afforded a lot of very, very talented riders who have ticked every box and have won derbies and South African championships and have never had the opportunity to represent their country and have that honor of saying, I was a Springbok rider, because we just don't have the platform to do it. And this has got to happen. So we need to pick your brain.
Yeah, we need to try and do it again. I keep on. I'm thinking about it again now. It's funny.
Get the cogs turning. Get the cogs turning.
As I'm talking to you, but it needs somebody to drive it. That's what I'm saying.
Tony, after Take a Chance, who came next? Where was Take a Chance in the picture right through those years? Was he the horse that you represented South Africa on, or did Jongleur come in at that stage? And when was Talisman?
Okay, Take a Chance probably went out in the middle 70s, and I then during that time when I was at the Kimberley show one year, and there was an amazing horse called Red Gambit, who was by Gambit.
I need you to sit back again. Sorry, we're just seeing your. Yeah, there you are. Okay. There you are.
He was by Gambit, and he had a full brother called Count Gambit, who was ridden by a guy called Brian. Can't remember his second name now. But anyway, Red Gambit won the Puissance Power Jumpers. It was really in the Nelspruit Showground as a B grade. That's a 130 horse. And Mickey Lowe was riding the horse. It belonged to Leslie Taylor. And he won. he for some reason, he ended up in the power jump on this B grade horse. And he won it at 2 meters 10, I think, which was too much. I mean, he overdid it. The horse had a suspect tendon before he rode it, and the horse broke down. And at that stage, Leslie had got divorced, and the horse ended up with his wife, Beryl, who was married to Tremaine Toms, who was the stud manager at Maritzfontein. So they sent Red Gambit to Maritzfontein, and he ran with the mares there as a gelding for 4 years. Tremaine blistered his legs to try and assist the tendons, because by that time the one tendon had become two tendons, bad tendons. And so he ran with the mares for 4 years. And then the 1 year I was down there with Take a Chance, Beryl said, why don't you, or Tremaine said to me, why don't you come and have a look at Red Gambit? So I went and he looked magnificent. So I said to Sheila Grayston, gee whiz, I'd like to give this horse another go because this horse can jump. And he came back to me, and he then went on to win Grand Prix again, even with his two tendons, two seriously bowed tendons, but with a lot of attention and loving care. I looked after him very, very carefully. He stayed sound for a good 4 or 5 years. So he won quite a few. He had one chink in his armor, and that was at the water jump. He jumped. He would not. He put 1 foot in the water all the time, and it lost me the Derby. It lost me many Grand Prix and other things because of that one issue, 4 faults. You know? Anyway, and then Bill Clifford, who owned Jongleur.
What was Red Gambit's pedigree?
Gambit, by Gambit.
Okay.
Not of your lady, somebody, I can't remember.
Yes.
By Gambit, yeah. Gambit produced some nice horses, eh?
Yeah. Gambit also broke down on the track. He also had dicky legs, was as fast as hell, but also an unsound horse.
That's right. Well,
so was Sheila Grayston, was she your owner? So when you say you spoke to her, she bought the horse for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Take a Chance was the first one. And then she bought Red Gambit, who was also a great success. And then the next good horse that came along was Jongleur. And that, I believe, was an Olympic horse. Philip Smith was riding the horse and had produced the horse with Bill Clifford's stepdaughter, Pookie. Philip produced the horse and also produced Jongleur's brother. Well, bred the same. It was Major Dominus, who won, he also won a lot of events on. So Major Dominus and Jongleur were by Dramatic, and Dramatic produced a host of horses. Philip produced quite a few horses by Tamburlaine. Was another one that won the Derby with Johnny. Dramatic had unbelievable jumping, siring possibilities. Anyway, so I got Jongleur because there was a difference between Philip and Clifford, who owned the horse. He came to me and said, won't I ride the horse? I said, look, I'd love to ride the horse, but you sort out the problems with Philip. He's a friend of mine. I can't even begin. So anyway, he ended up back at Clifford's house, and Jongleur came to me, and he was amazing. I mean, he was the first really Olympic horse I think I've ever ridden. He was great.
And Tony, tell me about him. He was a little bit before my time. Unfortunately, I never got to see the horse. Was he big horse?
Big horse, big, very long horse, also with a very long front. And I think that one of the reasons why the difference between Philip and Clifford arose was that at that stage, Philip got very influenced by the Americans, who were all riding their horses on a very short rein. That was their style at that time. They're not like that at all right now. But George Morris, who coached the Americans extensively, believed that was the way to ride. And I think it was a mistake, because the Americans had a very off period of about 4 or 5 years where they went off. And I think it was because of this way they rode. Gonda might agree or not disagree with me. But Jongleur had this enormous front. And if you restricted that front, he just couldn't use his back end. And so he started having fences, and I think Philip didn't like the fact that he couldn't get the horse to jump the way he wanted him to jump, and that's why there was a little bit of a difference between them. Anyway, Jongleur, I was thrilled to get, and although he'd already been quite successful with Philip, he'd never won anything really big, and he won the South African Championship with me and the Derby, and was a little bit slow, not exactly a fast horse, but quite careful. Huh? And
I have to point out to viewers here that might never have seen you ride that you were the complete antithesis of that short rein. You were very much a long rein, let the head out front, maybe
yeah,
your elbows a little bit behind you, and
yeah,
really let
yeah,
the horse use itself. So he
yeah,
appreciated that.
he did. He blossomed immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately, right from the first day I got him. I took him down to the Royal Show at Pietermaritzburg, and from that day onwards, he was just that's what he'd been needing. And anyway, that's
What did Philip say to you?
he never didn't want to speak to me. Yeah, no, unfortunately, it wasn't a topic of conversation that I could have easily with Philip again. You know, shame. But anyway, bless him. He was
Yeah.
an outstanding horseman and produced some amazing horses in South Africa. You know? Yeah.
So
Anyway,
you won a derby with him, a South African championships with him.
and you know, he was in all the Grand Prix. He was in the prize money. If he didn't win it, he was very close to it because he was. If he didn't win it, he wasn't fast enough. That was the reason. You know? And then a very good friend of mine for many years has been Jerry Du Toit, who owns the Alzu operation, and he'd been riding for many years and had developed he moved from Johannesburg to Middelburg, where he started his very, very prosperous and successful Alzu operation. Breeding wise, he started off with a Shagya Arab stallion, which came out as infoal to with one of the mares that Sydney Press brought from. He brought some mares from Ireland and from Sweden at that stage, and horse brought out, and so Drabant was born. And he was like a 15 one-hand bundle of energy. And the first stallion, the first progeny, or his progeny, was with some thoroughbred mares that Jerry Du Toit had got, one of which was a mare called Moinoi, who was by Appreciation. Appreciation was the stallion of King Cole. So he had proved himself as a sire of jumping horses. And Moinoi, very, very interesting, at the last Capital Stud auction. There's still horses that are traced back to Moinoi. So she was amazing. She had 17 foals without interruption on Jerry's farm. The first one of which was Talisman. And Talisman was such a handful that they'd given up with him. Jerry's son, who runs the Alzu operation now, that's Jerry Gerry. It is Gerry Jr. Rode him as a junior together with his another horse that was bred at that time called Emerald King, who was also by Drabant out of just trying to think, also a jumping mare. But he didn't have quite the talent that Talisman had. But Talisman was very difficult in the head, very difficult. And when young Jerry went to university at the OFS to learn to do agriculture, they were just standing on the farm doing nothing. And I had uh, then started to ride a few young horses for Jerry Du Toit. And I said, no, what's happened to those two grey horses, those two little grey horses? And he said, man, they're just standing there. I said, well, send them, man. He said, but they're tiny. I said, send them. And they arrived. They arrived as Emerald King was highly talented, but didn't quite have the scope that was required. I mean, he went from C to JA in 1 year. That's how good he was. I mean, he was just so supple and quick. But Talisman, I said to him, this is the star. And he said, no, you're mad. This thing's mad. I said, don't be silly. You don't understand what you've got here. Let me just get to the bottom of this guy. And it took me quite a bit of
I
time.
have to see your face while you're telling the story. I need to see your. There you go. Yeah.
I said, just give me a bit of time with him, because he's something special. Talking rubbish, and all this other stuff. I said, just wait. And it took me about 2 years. I got them as 5-year-olds, and by the time they were 7, both of them had gone into, at that stage, A grade. And Talisman just got better and better and better. And I mean, he has a special place in my heart, because hell, if you want to see a horse with guts and courage, that was him, because he was 15 too, huh? And he never,
And
ever.
you're not a small guy, Tony. You're not a small guy.
It's called more guy, and I was weighing, hell, I don't know, 78 kgs at that stage. Thank God I'm only about 82 now. But he carried me, and it didn't matter what I faced him at. Didn't matter. I mean, he beat Power Force with Barry in a jump off at, I still remember it today, for the accumulator at Maritzburg, going flat out. And Preston had built the jumps. The wall was, in old days, it was 6'3" in the jump off. And our Talisman beat Power Force Barry going flat out. So that's how he was. And I had a lot of success with him. He won Transvaal Championship. He was second in the South African Championship to Gonda on Flaunt. Had an unlucky 4 faults in a huge course that Nartis Ferreira built. Still, Nartis says the biggest course he's ever built, and it was huge. And I just, he was an amazing horse. I can only say wonderful things about him and about Jerry and the way he produced the horse. And he went on and on and on. Every time we got down the years, and I'm saying to him, well, when are you going to produce another Talisman? No, don't talk to me about that horse. I said, yeah, the first horse you bred's the best horse you've ever bred.
Yeah.
Which he sort of is at pains to accept that maybe I'm right. Anyway,
Did Moinoi ever produce anything remotely as good as their first foal?
No, because I don't think she got a chance. I don't know why he didn't zone in on her and put her to select. I mean, if she would have been still going when he bought Optimum, the one that I think was such a good sire of horses. Also a bit of a squib when you looked at him, but with an amazing stride. Talisman didn't have an amazing stride, but what he had was speed. So what he lacked in scope from pure jumping ability, you could make up with speed. So you could gallop him into a big fence. And his speed and his carefulness will get him across it,
Yeah.
And that was that's the relationship I developed with him,
Yeah. And he was hardy, Tony. I mean, he was around for a long time. You got him as a 5-year-old. He was jumping until what age?
17, 18.
Yeah.
12 years from that, from 7 to 11 years at the top end of the sport. It's pretty good. And he was not unsound. Never unsound.
Was it a big adjustment moving from Jongleur, who was a big, lengthy horse, to
You,
that little, almost pony that you had to gallop?
it is, but when you've got two horses like that and they're so different, because I mean, when you're walking your courses, your measurement, you've got two horses you've got to be thinking about, where the one is dropping strides, the other one's putting in another stride, always. I mean, I never, ever, ever, that was one of the rules I made with Talisman. I never stood him back, never stood him off, never asked him to give more than he could, because he could run into the bottom of something and jump and knock it and not knock it down. And that was what gave him the confidence to be able to do it. And a horse like that, if you can get that understanding with them, it's the way to do it. Then you're not asking them to jump at maximum effort every time they jump. And then they do it for so long, and then they say, "Hey, no, I can't do this," And I never did that with him, and that's why he was so good. Whereas Jongleur, you could stand him off from anywhere, Not that I want to do that. I think that standoff or standoffs at jumps should be kept for jump offs. Don't do too many of them, because it does take maximum effort out of them. And all they have to do is land on the back pole of a spread a few times, and you start rattling them a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Tony, some of us, we take what we can get.
yeah. Well,
if that's the one that's there, we're going on that one.
Yeah, I've watched you. You're pretty good. You've got the right idea. And you don't stand off too often, eh? Am I right or am I wrong? Am I wrong?
Yeah, we have our moments. We try. Yeah. Tell me, Jongleur, you never told me his pedigree. What was his breeding?
Dramatic.
Oh, yes, you did.
Quite dramatic, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry we've lost that dramatic line, because there were, Darrell had a horse called Golden Oriole, also by Dramatic, another superstar. No, 16-3, 17-hand horse with just unbelievable scope and ability. And Major Dominus was one. And then those ones that Philip Tamberlane, and there are a few others that Philip had. Excellent. No, they were really one after the other. They were good. You could go and buy any Dramatic, and as long as he was sound, I'm sure that he would have jumped. We don't have and I'm sorry that we've lost, because there's still. I'm not that I'm punting thoroughbreds, but there's still good thoroughbreds around. People say, "Oh, they don't make them like that." There are still very nice big thoroughbreds racing that I've seen, and I'm sure that if one could just zoning on their breeding a little bit and get back to where we were, where we knew, not every time that they would be superstars, but a good proportion of the time, they were conformed well, and they weren't unsound. I think that we'd have because they're competitive. The thoroughbreds are competitive. And if I see how the horses are going in Europe today, they're getting lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And I mean, you can't tell the difference between what was a Jongleur type horse and the horse that Marcus Ening is riding. They won't. They've steered away from the heavy type horse, and I understand why, because they can't catch the light ones.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. Yeah.
It's now being won at the gallop, and that's what that horse is bred for. If you could combine that gallop with a bit of the power, not that the thoroughbred doesn't possess the power, then maybe we're onto something here. And this keeps coming up in these chats, that maybe that's something that the breeders need to look at. We have the foundation of the thoroughbred in this country, a long history of the thoroughbred. We need to put that to use.
Yeah. Well, not that I go to Europe a lot, but the few times I have been, every time I get involved with one of the studs or one of the verbants, the same question comes up: haven't you got a good thoroughbred stallion for us? I said, but you want something that's jumped and that sort of thing. Well, we'll look at whatever you've got, and they would love to get a proper thoroughbred jumping lion into their system there. I'm sure, because At the Hanoverian stud in Celle, I mean, they got 500 stallions standing there in the stud, in the middle of Celle. And there are cart horses, they're Arabs, they're thoroughbreds, they're warm bloods, and they mix and match all the time. To try and keep a type of horse going that they want to see. And you know, if they had a thoroughbred stallion in one of those studs, I think he could only do the whole breeding system a favor. I think the French have used the Arabs and the Arab, at least the thoroughbreds and the Arabs, more than the Germans have, and the French produce nice horses, though. Yeah.
Another very, very good thoroughbred that you had, and I think it was the Archangel Persian Wonderline, was the wonderful Lightning Trail. Now, tell me about him, how you came to get him. I need to see your face again. You've gone a bit close again.
Sorry.
There you are.
What
There you
is
are.
wrong with me? I saw him jumping with Johnny Mendes. Johnny Mendes had him. They bought him down at in Port Elizabeth. He comes from Port Elizabeth. And it was at a time when Johnny just wanted to sell a horse. And I made him an offer and he sold him. And I think that it wasn't for any reason other than just money that Johnny was actually happy to part with him. But also, he's a real jongleur type horse. That could have been an Olympic horse, I think. You know, because he was unbelievably brave. Maybe could have been slightly more careful, but you know, again, you can't have everything. If you want courage, you know, you can't expect them to clear everything without touching a few here and there. And we had some good times. I won some nice classes with him. And I put him right there with Jongleur and Red Gambit and Take a Chance. He was as good as any of them, and a most wonderful temperament, you know. And that was Persian Wonder, huh? Persian Wonder, Archangel, yeah. It's another stallion that we've lost sight of, you know. I'd love to. There's a fellow called Charles.
Charles Baker.
Yeah, and he's got quite a compendium of old. I must actually get together with him sometime because I'm sure. I just hope he's brought it up to date to see what kept track with what thoroughbred horses are being successful these days. I don't know if that's
no, he knows. I chat to Charles a lot. I chat to him virtually on a daily basis now, and
really.
And yeah, he's very, very passionate about the thoroughbred, and you know, one of us that feels that there is a huge still, we need to bring him back because he's the ultimate athlete. I wanted to ask you, just Talisman, did you have to place him in the right classes? Did you have to save him for the big ones? Because you say you had to run him at the fences. You couldn't make too many mistakes on him or have him far off a fence. Yeah. Did he have the scope for the real top classes, or was it just that he had you on his back that he achieved what he achieved?
Well, you know, scope you can describe in two ways, and I tried to do it just now. One, the horse has just got physical power. The other one is that he can do it with a bit of speed. You can get scope through speed. And that's what I found I could do with Talisman, because I never ever did not put him in a class because I thought he couldn't jump the jumps. Never. I believe that he imparted such confidence in me that I felt that if I'd asked him to jump the moon, he would have tried. You know, he's that sort of horse. So I didn't ever pick my classes. No, I'm quite competitive in myself. And he was my number one horse at that stage. And if it meant that he had to jump the South African Championship, he must jump it. And he never let me down. He was placed in all of the. He won that. He won that Riders' Championship for me, the first one they ever held. He won it for me because nobody else could ride him. I was like a secret weapon, You know,
Yeah.
it developed all sorts of quirky things like putting in a trotting stride every now and again in the middle of a combination and that sort of stuff. I mean, do it.
Mm.
The worst thing was to ride him in a 6-bar. I mean, he started land, half a trot stride, a canter stride and jump, or a canter stride, half a trot stride, and people would say, "Oh God, I can't watch. It's fine. He just, he come out the other side,
Mm.
and that's, you just. I was thinking about what you said just now. When I had two horses like Lightning Trail and Talisman, when you've got two horses that you've developed such an understanding with, when you get on their backs, you just click into their way.
Mm.
So it never bothered me that one's method of operation was completely the opposite to the other. I mean, I could never ever ride Lightning Trail like I rode Talisman, and I never did, because it was automatic. It was like just switching into drive in a motor car. I got onto Talisman, and that's how I went, with. And you get like that. You get two horses like that. I think you go on automatic pilot with them.
Mm. But like you say, you had to be cognizant that when you were walking the track, because the
Yeah,
distance was an 8 stride, it would be an 8 for a Lightning Trail, but maybe a 9 for a Talisman, or
not maybe, definitely.
yeah.
And got even to the stage that it would be 5 instead of 4. You know,
Mm. Mm.
but knowing that 5 was a fast 5 with Talisman. I mean,
Yeah.
he was really bound, because he was not didn't have a big stride, but he was very much with his hind end underneath you all the time.
Mm.
Yeah,
And he never battled for the back rail.
never ever.
Mm. Yeah.
Uh, uh, yeah, I was lucky. I had a good understanding with the guy.
Yeah. 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 Would you if you were to say this horse was my best in that he had the
Yeah.
most scope, the most talent, you think that you could have jumped any track? And then if you had to say this horse would be my favorite, would it be the same horse or different horses, and who would they be?
I wouldn't pick one of them, really. They
Mm.
gave me such fun and such joy that to say one was better. Each had their time in my life,
Mm.
and they came at the right time. And I've left one horse out. In 1994, I think Gonda might have talked about the fact that she and I tried to go and buy horses in uh, in Europe for the 1992 Olympics. Okay,
Yes, yes.
and she and I went, and it was a disaster. I mean, they tried to catch us, and we came away without any horses. But she was determined to continue, and she eventually got a horse with Shokomola. Um, I think she could have got a better horse, and I'm sure she'll agree with me. But anyway, because um, it got her to the games, and that was she ticked that box.
Mm.
Um, but I carried on after that with one of the owners that she and I went to see, and I found a horse that his son was riding in juniors. It had been to the European Junior Championship, called Onyx, French horse. And eventually I bought Onyx from him, and everybody said, "What the hell are you doing with this horse?" And I said, just funny enough, I've got, he's got what I need. If we're going to go, because I was trying to get to the World Equestrian Games in The Hague.
Mm.
Um, I don't believe I need a super careful horse. I need a Talisman with a bit more in him than Talisman, because Talisman was my horse at the time. It's 1994.
Mm.
And so I bought him, and I took him and everybody, all the guys in Europe said, "You mad? Where are you going with this horse?" So I said, "Well, and then I started jumping in the category A Grand Prix, and he wasn't doing badly. He had 4 faults and 8 faults and 4 faults, but they weren't bad 4 faults. There wasn't any faults ever where he lacked the scope. So we went to the games, and he went very well. I must say, I didn't set the fire, but I jumped, and he jumped in all the classes, and he got through to the second last round in the World Games, and came through. That was the first round of the Nations Cup. And Anneli was there, and we'd made up a team with Anneli and myself and David McPherson, and Philip. And Philip unfortunately broke his leg in one of the warm-up competitions, so he wasn't riding. So there were only three of us. And unfortunately, a team competition, you can't really go in with three riders unless you really, you've got Beerbaum and Ening and somebody else like that. Otherwise, because you really got one hand behind your back, you're fighting with one hand behind your back. Anyway, sorry. Okay, am I back?
Yeah, there you are, man.
Okay, so we went. I said to her, well, I don't care about you lot. If you don't want to come, I'm going. You see, because I said I'll jump as an individual. And Onyx, I think he ended up about, out of 60 or 70 starters, he was about late number 20s at the end. But he jumped well. And unfortunately, I wanted to bring him to South Africa, and he had a heart attack and died just before I could bring him out here. So he would have been another super horse here. Also, could have been a bit more careful, but if you want to jump big fences, a good horse to have. And I think that,
What was it like? What was it like jumping at the games? Was that a big? That wasn't because you jumped as a junior. Did you go back and ride a few times overseas in the years before you went to the games, or was this the next time you were overseas?
No. It was the next time I was overseas. I didn't ride in between. And that's why, these horses that I'm telling you about now, they gave me confidence, that given the right horse, you can be competitive with the best. And when I was at The Hague, I looked at Retina Z with Beerbaum, and I looked at Schlotak with his mare that he won the games with that time, and I thought, gee, those guys are really good. But give me a ride on Retina Z, who I thought was amazing, and you'd be competitive. I'm not saying that you'd set the world alight and win every class, but you'd be competitive, and I still to that day feel like that. If you've got the right confidence, the horse knows, and you're sitting on the right sort of horse where you're not worried about whether he's going to jump the jump or not. That's no good, and funny enough, just talking about that issue, I was watching a clip the other night where they were going back to the '68 Olympics in Mexico City, which the Americans won. No, the Americans didn't win, but Steinkraus won the individual. And Steinkraus came to South Africa in about 1970 after the '68 Olympics. And I gave him Take a Chance to Ride. And so I got to know him quite well. And he said that fence that they built in the individual, there's an oxa that they built, which he said was the first fence he's ever seen that was really virtually unjumpable. And that was, he had the dimensions there, which was, it was incredible. It was like 2 meters at the back and 1.80 meter in front by 2 meters wide. And you build that, and you can't believe that a horse actually would jump it. Yeah. And he was on a thoroughbred called Snowbound, and he had that same confidence in the horse. I mean, he did knock the jump down. There were only 2 in the world that cleared it. But it's that, it's that confidence that you need, that we can put them at anything. And they know, they're going to take off,
Yeah.
And that's, in the end, you don't want them falling down in the middle with you.
Well, this leads
Yeah,
me to my next question. In that there are a lot of talented
yeah,
riders out there who just don't get the horsepower underneath them, and don't
yeah,
probably throughout their careers get the accolades and the success that they deserve according to their talent, because they just don't have the means. So how important is it to find the support? I mean, the riding is just today just one
yeah,
part of it. It's, you got to have the
yeah,
horsepower, you got to have the owners, you've got to have the
yeah,
sponsors. And a guy like you's been very fortunate. You've managed to get that. You had Ipoh for a very, very long time.
yeah.
Talk to me about that. I mean, that side of the sport.
Yeah, that's a difficult side, you know, and um, I hope that anybody that has got that sort of a talent meets
Mm,
the right person somewhere along the line with the funds to back him. Um, I think if the passion is there, you'll find a way,
mm,
you know. And if I go back to the years when, you know, Gonda and Mickey and Annalie were at the top, you know, we all had two horses in the big classes, and somehow we managed to maintain that every year. Uh, Whether it was Talisman who came out of the blue or another horse like that, we managed to do that. And if the passion's there, you'll
mm,
find a way. You know, I can't say there's a magical answer. Uh, I would like, if possible, to find a way to um, get that sort of talent to the horses,
mm,
instead of the good horses being wasted on talent that, you know, is not going to be there. It's not going to not going to come through. I don't know, Aiden, how you can, maybe you can help me here. If there was a way, hell, I'd love to find it, because there are
mm,
guys. I know there are lots of, not lots, because, you know, you don't have a lot of people that have that sort of talent.
mm.
And you don't know a lot of the time that the talent is there until they're jumping at the top.
Until the horse finds them, it's,
That's right. That's right.
you got to pair
Yeah,
them up.
I don't know if there's a magical answer to that. I just, it's a difficult one. Huh?
To you, Tony, who were your biggest rivals, competitors, contemporaries that you thought, hell, that's the person I need to beat? I mean, there were quite a few of them, weren't there?
There were. Well, not as many as maybe oh, I don't know. Maybe there are more today. I don't know. Uh, but certainly Gonda, Mickey, Peter Gotts, um, Annalie.
Mm,
Annalie was, I mean, she's an incredible woman, that, you know, sure. You know, what person wins badminton twice on the same horse, goes to the Olympics? Amazing.
mm,
Show jumping. That's
mm,
incredible. I mean, I don't think there's ever been another horse like that.
mm,
The problem with that horse, it came too early in her life. I think that's the
yeah,
problem. That's merely a monarch. But I
mm,
mean, Annalie, hugely competitive.
yeah,
Um, yeah, you know, if I take those three or four, the Meyerbergs, I mean,
yeah.
they uh, as unconventional as they were, uh, they had a talent. I don't know whether that talent would survive in the sort of the courses that we have today.
Mm.
But
Why do you say that? Because I was going to
yeah,
ask you if you were going to compare the riders of yesteryear to the riders of today. A lot has changed, but would they match up? Who would be better? What would the outcomes be?
I think that they would adapt. Those riders would adapt to what we're doing today. I mean, there's no doubt that Annalie, Gonda, Mickey, they'd all adapt.
Mm,
Uh, Peter, hugely talented. They would adapt. They'd realize that, you know, there was more control that is needed, more related distances that you find in the tracks today. But you know, once you're in it, and you've come to the conclusion that rhythm is all important. If you keep your rhythm, the stride, you'll get to, you know, the strides will work themselves out. Even if
mm,
they're slightly shorter or slightly longer, you'll find your way. But if you start messing around with your rhythm, then you're in dead trouble. And that probably the main difference is that there was a lot of the riders going back a bit used to break the rhythm a lot, and that would not survive in today's world. That I'm sure of. But Gonda was always on fantastic. Mickey always super. Peter always super rhythm. Philip Smith, wonderful rhythm. And that's why they were so successful. So I think today it's rhythm, and you ride with a lot of rhythm. So yeah, my boy.
Thank you.
No, for
Tony,
sure.
before we leave you, you still ride a bit? Are you still competing? I've
Yeah.
seen you at the shows, but where we're at with your riding?
I've got a horse who I've had a lot of problems with sound wise, and he's been a bit ill. He was a bit ill last year, so I didn't do much competing. But he's ready to go again. 130 horse. Yeah.
Yeah. And coaching, you've never coached, or you enjoy coaching, or you coach a little bit? Because Gail told us you went to Rome with her and had to do more coaching of the rider and put her mind at ease when she was watching Jos Lonsing jump massive
Yeah.
oxes.
No, I can help people with whatever I know. I'm not an up down coacher. I don't want to coach people from the start, but certainly people with talent. I'd love to help them anytime. I have never done any coaching courses, but it's just my gut feel of what's right and what's wrong. And you can see easily, where the mistakes are. So I have never done it simply because I just haven't done it. I can't say that it's. There are people that I've helped, and I enjoy that. When I did do it.
But
Maybe
you're open if somebody gave you a call and said, "Hey, I'm battling. Can you please come and cast an eye?"
Absolutely, with pleasure, anytime,
Brilliant.
anytime. Yeah.
And I have to ask you this one final question, because your trademark when you went around the ring was the mouth open and flicking the hat off the back. You hardly ever finished a course with the helmet still on your head. What was that all about? Was that deliberate? Was it just, why did that always happen?
Seriously, I've got a big head. And I seriously, and I mean physically a big head. I hope not in any other way, but I battled with a hat that fitted. I really battled with a hat and in fact, when I went to Europe in that 1994 stint, the German judge called me in and he said, "My friend, if that hat comes off one more time," and I had it on with elastoplast and all sorts of things, and it really wasn't flipped off. It just, if the thing got loose and it came in my eyes, I shook it off. But it wasn't intentional, I promise you. It just became a thing, and in the end, it became a bit of a thing, a bit of a laughing thing, but really, it was my head, and I mean, we've overcome it now with these chaps, these harnesses that you have to wear. So, took my.
It now doesn't feel right that it's still there as you cross the finish.
I hate it with a passion. I hate it so much, but I understand it's there for a reason, And if any young person's listening to this, don't ride without a hat. I still ride without hats, and that's wrong. I get taken to town about it all the time. But I'm uncomfortable. Yeah. Anyway.
It's been absolutely wonderful chatting to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. You're one of the real masters, one of the real legends, and I'm trying to motivate that we get some sort of South African show jumping Hall of Fame, whether it's an online Hall of Fame where we can get your old videotapes and get them digitized and get them on there so people can remember, the youngsters of today. That's the passion that I have. When I was a kid, I was videotaping all of you guys and watching it again and again. We need to bring those out, find them, put them somewhere so that we can relive those big moments, because there were many. And from myself, from everybody else watching, thank you for all the years.
Oh, Hayden, you're too kind. You're too kind. Thank you very much. Thank you for the honor of being invited to come and talk to you. You know, I've watched you develop your career in the sport and your riding. Your riding has improved unbelievably, and I wish you all the luck with it. And congratulations for what you've achieved.
Thank
really,
you.
I really do admire it.
It's been wonderful chatting, Tony. Have a wonderful evening. We'll chat to you soon when we get out of this, all safe and sound on the other side.
Thanks so much. Okay. God bless.
Take
and
care.
Be safe. Okay.
All the best, Tony. Cheers.
Okay.